Oh, good afternoon, everybody. I'm so glad to be here in this beautiful city. Nice to see you all today. Nice to see some familiar faces. Really good to see some unfamiliar faces. So welcome. I'm going to do my best to speak slowly. That's not something that I'm normally prone to do. Presenting is almost like an aerobic activity for me, so I'm kind of like, okay. Yeah, I'll try not to do that today. So Jamie, where are you? Jamie's going to be in the back. He's going to give me the big arm sign if I'm going too fast, yeah? All right, Ruby. Okay, then we're ready to go. Okay, so today we are going to be talking about crisis communication, when things blow up online, and particularly in social media. We're going to talk about what is going on in the communication realm and how do we change the game. How do we take it from just merely crisis communication to crisis conversations. So let's just jump in. So in this presentation today, we're going to be talking about crisis types, various impacts, who's involved, who are your stakeholders. We'll talk about the function and goal of crisis communication, traditional methods and mediums, because 10 years ago, social media really didn't have the impact that it has today. Well, I'll just keep continuing. We're going to talk about new methods and mediums. We're going to talk about why social media has changed the game. And then we're going to talk about secondary disasters and communication disasters. Lastly, if we have enough time at the end, we'll go through some examples. Those who were at the conference last year, obviously, Bounty, the HMS Bounty seeking seems to be the big example that everyone continually talks about. I'm going to try to talk about other ones today, because really something at Bounty's level is not something we're really likely to see again, hopefully ever, but also just based on everybody becoming more educated when it comes to social media in general. So we'll talk about the kind of incidences you're more likely to encounter when you're using social media. Okay, so a word about social media. Online environment, different from the offline environment. It is. When we speak to each other, when I'm communicating to you, what do you notice first? You notice my body language. You notice what's going on with my face. You're paying attention to the tone of my voice. My words actually have very little impact aside from the general feeling that you're getting from a visual social cue. Social media is really different that way. The language is different. The social cues are different. Because once we drop that veil of technology, once we go online, that voice, that face, that disappears. And we're missing a lot of information, more than you think. But it's not that the social cues have completely disappeared. It's just that they're different, and you have to recognize those signs and why they're different. The social norms are also different. The rules of engagement. If I'm going to meet someone and if I'm going to disagree with them, I'm hardly going to go walk up to you and really get into your face in a public place and then just be really agitated or aggravated right to you. Oh, here, okay? She's like, what's happening now? You wouldn't do that in polite society. But online, it feels like not only is that happening, it's happening all the time. And generally, we see a lot of yelling in this area. And these social norms are different. But there's also ways of combating that. There's ways that society comes together and actually enforces a different type of social norm. So, getting into types of crises. More commonly, we have a faux pas, poor communication. Someone misspoke, something happened, something was interpreted a certain way. We have accidents involving person or property. We also have transgressions. We have products, something happens, a service occurs, service goes wrong, some type of harm is experienced. And we have external events. I use this kind of just as an example of terrorism, but in our case, a lot of times it's probably going to be a natural disaster of some sort. All have varying degrees of intention, so to speak. That may be a natural disaster. There's nothing personal about a hurricane. It's just going to happen. You just have to suck it up and deal with it. Although some people say the gods might be angry, the intention is very different. But all of them do. There's various degrees of intention. People really react to intention. It's the idea that there was some premeditation or thought behind it, and you spoke the way that you did, or that has occurred, and now I'm somehow offended or feel a certain way about it. So intention has a lot to do with it. Now, the important thing to remember, every crisis is a unique event. No two are the same. It's different people, it's a different situation. There's a lot of moving parts that go on in a crisis. So when we talk about crisis communication and how to deal with it in social media, one thing you have to understand is that it's good to look at case studies. It's good to see how people have handled it in the past. But just because this thing worked for these people in this situation doesn't mean it's going to work for you in this situation. We learn a lot of lessons from them, but you cannot in any way say that it's prescriptive. If this, then do that. Just doesn't work. That's not the world that we live in. They're very, very complicated events. So you need to keep that in mind. Now, I attended a session earlier today, and that was about customer complaints and turning them into an opportunity to find Bristle. And it was wonderful because it dovetails nicely with a lot of what I'm going to be talking about here. It seems very cliche, but the Chinese character for crisis is this. The first character on top is danger. The second character underneath are open doors. It's danger as opportunity. And it is. A crisis can be an opportunity to do something good, to do something better, to take a bad situation and at least either ameliorate it, to help mitigate maybe future events, to turn it around. So as long as we can change our mindset that this disaster is happening and everything's going to hell, if we can just kind of change our mindset and say this is an opportunity, it really does affect the way that you can proceed. So, crisis impacts. How do crises impact us? One, definitely your reputation. First and foremost, the thing that's going to impact you most is going to be your reputation. You can't avoid it. It can affect your daily business activities. It can also be a threat to your future business and operations. In this particular, this is really particular to tall ships, it's going to impact your industry. If we consider what happened with Bounty, all of a sudden it's like, ooh, we have to look at ourselves. How might we have handled this? Could we have handled this any better than they handled this, particularly on social media? If we really are honest with ourselves, aren't we all really in the same boat as far as our education about social media, our understanding, the way that we may have dealt with it? I think so. I think a lot of people, if we're really honest, people might have looked at me and said, yeah, we might have done the same thing. We may have made the same mistakes. So, when we talk about being a threat to the industry, yeah, because this happened to this code. People don't think that way. It's not just singular. People kind of deal with what they know. So they hear about Bounty, but they may turn their attention to me because you're what they know. So yes, it can be a threat to an industry. Now, a lot of this is affected by time. Timing is so important because when we're talking about social media and what's going on in social media, it's immediate, it's often escalating, it has ripple effect, and when we're talking about having to deal with an online crisis, timing is everything. Timing is everything because you are dealing with a relentless flow of information. So, other things we need to know about crises. They're multifaceted. More than just about you and your company, also about your stakeholders. And people have a misconception of what their stakeholders really are. It's amazing when I ask people, who are your stakeholders? They say, well, the people who support our vote. It's not really true. It's not the whole story. You have internal stakeholders, you have external stakeholders. So when you think about your internal stakeholders, your employees, they're impacted by this. Your managers. If you happen to be a private company, the owners are impacted. We talk about the external stakeholders, people who do business with you. They may rely on the income that they generate, but do business with you. They're impacted. Society, the court of public opinion is a very important stakeholder, whether we choose to recognize that or not. For better or for worse, if it's just the truth of the matter. Government, creditors, shareholders, if someone has a share of the company, and of course your customers. There are a lot of different stakeholders. And so when you're dealing with a crisis, you can't just think of one, you have to think of them all. It's very hard to speak generally, it's very hard to speak to all of your stakeholders, but it's something that you need to keep in mind when you're crafting messages in response. So, I'm a researcher. I study social media during extreme events, and I love crisis communication because it's so twisted and messy, and it's horrible. It just brings out the worst in people, but it can also bring out the best in people too. So you really see a lot of really awful things, but you also see a lot of beautiful phenomena out there, social phenomena. I love that part of it too. So when we look at crises, and I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is what I want you to understand, the complexity of what a crisis can be, given your unique circumstances and your unique situation. There's probably three categories. So I'm looking at this pointer. We have a victim cluster. Something happened, and your your company, your boat, is a victim of it as well. Something has befallen you. So what you want to understand when you go back and see this, because the slide will be available to everyone, okay. You can be a natural disaster, a rumor, workplace violence, product tampering, something happens. It could be an accident. So something happened on the boat, it wasn't intentional, but something happened, there might be an injury. You can talk about the challenges, someone's maybe calling you out on it, they're saying you don't operate the boat in a safe manner. We can talk at technical error accidents, technology or equipment failure, not necessarily your fault, but you're experiencing fallout of that situation. Technical error or product harm, equipment failure. This isn't something that I expect you all to deal with, but in understanding that these are just not a comprehensive list or an exhaustive list, but these are examples that we don't see. So in the victim cluster, if you're the victim, the threat to your reputation is pretty low. If we're talking about accidental cluster, medium threat, depending on your role in the situation. The one that really can do in this last one, the preventable cluster, something that actions you should have taken or could have taken, something happened, maybe it's deliberate, maybe it's not, but something occurs, there's injury, it's very catastrophic. And that's the highest threat that you can have to your reputation. So when we think about it this way, having that perception of how to speak to people really is based on your understanding of where you fall in this. So to bring up Dundee again, they really actually had a misperception of the situation. They saw themselves as victims. Not everybody agreed with that. Most people saw that as the preventable cluster, right? People thought largely it was preventable. So they were speaking up here, not realizing that the majority of people saw them down here. So we had a mismatch of, people understanding the situation, this organization understanding the situation, and what happens in between. Because the message clearly did more damage than good. Okay, so response types. Just like we have different crises, we have different impacts, we have different stakeholders, we also have different responses. I'm just going to talk generally to some of the more basic ones. Most common strategy used? Denial. That's either denying that something's happening or denying your role in it. And that's actually pretty common. People they just don't see that something's wrong. This is a big deal. So they may be doing that defensively because they can't accept the truth of the situation, or they really might not see that there's anything wrong. Maybe everybody's screaming at them that something's wrong. You can have diminishment. They might diminish how big the situation is, how dangerous it may be, or diminish the role the organization may have in it. Again, that can be due to varying intent. There's rebuilding. You know what? Yep, accept it. This is happening. This is horrible. We apologize. What can we do wrong? Or bolstering. That is neither denying nor diminishing nor rebuilding, just trying to, rally the troops. We're tall ship, whatever, let's go, and they do. Penn State, when they had the sexual scandal at Penn State, a common response that you saw time and time again, we are Penn State. And that's classic bolstering. Just trying to remember, we're all together, we're all in a team. And this is actually a very common response strategy. So, most used is often bolstering, also denial. The most effective thing is always going to be rebuilding. Speak to the truth of the situation and then deal with the rest. The least effective is always going to be denial. Whether you just don't see the situation for what it is, when you have thousands of people screaming at you that this thing is happening, whether you believe it or not, you just have to accept it. Because we'll talk about why that is, but something is happening, you have to deal with what is in front of you. And the end goal of all of this is this. Crisis management is not good versus bad. It's preventing the bad from getting worse. You have to accept that you may not be able to fix the situation, but you can mitigate the fallout. You can try to make it less bad. You can try to salvage what is going to be left of your reputation. Okay, so something's happened, either externally or internally, and your Facebook or your Twitter feed is blowing up. What do you do next? It's always going to be damage control. You have to go into that mode. You have to start thinking about that mode. Hopefully you have a plan. Hopefully you've talked about these things with your office mates. Hopefully your organization has discussed when you've seen such things, because this kind of stuff is in the news all the time, is it not? You always see someone screwing up online, yeah? Someone puts their foot in it? Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully you have some type of plan in place and you've discussed it, but you have to get into damage control mode. But first and foremost, depending on what's going on, what kind of crisis you're experiencing, you always have to deal with the physical first. So if this is a matter of someone being hurt, someone being killed, or general confusion and chaos over what is going on, you have to speak to the physical. You have to speak words that help people protect themselves physically if you're in a position to do so. So, constructive information for physical safety, correcting information, simply not saying no comment on it is not going to help. If someone is injured, say that they're injured. If you know to the extent and you're comfortable speaking it, say it. If someone has been killed, you should say that. Details is varying, depending on what you're comfortable speaking to. But, again, correct the information that is out there. Also, effective information for emotional guidance, if you're in a position to do so. So, yes, if this is going on, we can all remain calm, we can prep. We're going to find out everything we know, we'll be communicating to you in such a way. Speaking to people plainly, calmly, gives them emotional guidance. We understand that everybody's upset, but they're with us. We're going to work our way through this. So we have physical, correcting information, we have emotional information. So I want you to pause and let's go back about reputation for a second. Think about reputation in context. When you have a crisis, immediately your reputation, for better or worse, is going to take a hit. There's no avoiding it. Every crisis does this. So when you think about reputation, you have to think of it this way. Your reputation is your capital. You have a good, solid organization, you have good communication, maybe online or physically with your stakeholders. That's money in the bank. That's really money in the bank for you. When a crisis occurs, you have to start spending it. How much of that is going to depend. So, build your good works, good communication. This is why great customer service is always a good thing. This is why treating people with respect, having good communication online, having good rapport with your customers is always a good thing. Because the minute that decreases offline, you're going to immediately experience it online. No matter the fault, your image is always going to be tarnished. So, in a crisis, you have to spend that capital. You start spending that little bit of money in the bank. And at the end of the day, how much is really going to be up to you. How you handle the situation is going to be how much you can protect some of that capital. And in some cases, we'll build it. Some people, some companies, some organizations suffer really through catastrophic online events and recover beautifully. Some of them have. Hopefully we get to those examples. But why does this happen? Why do you think this happens? I'm literally asking, why do you think this happens? How many see the social media as being like the wild, wild west? Be honest. How many think it's just like pure chaos out there? You're not wrong. It's kind of right. How many of you see social media as being very inconsequential? Inconsequential? In what way? Okay, so you see it as uncontrollable. Okay. But some people see it as gossip, mostly gossip. Mostly people see it as people being irrational online and being very loud about it, and prolific about it. But a lot of people see social media as being inconsequential communication. But when a disaster happens, where's the first place everybody goes? Yeah. You're hitting Facebook, you're hitting Twitter, you're going online. And it is. And you know what? And I like a good dog meme like the rest of you. I do. I'm like crazy dog lady on Facebook. I love a good dog meme there. But social media is fluffy and fun and inconsequential until it's not. Just like I see my coworkers and we might joke in the hallway, and we might gossip, and we might have this inconsequential, exchange until we don't have to, until we need to have a different type of exchange. And that way, social media does reflect real life. If you go through your day and you think about the exchanges you have with people, think about how much of it is just really irrelevant. Comment on the weather, how you doing? Did you really ask how you were doing, or just saying, hey, how you doing? Just acknowledging the existence. Yeah, a lot of the daily communication we have is inconsequential. And a lot of what we do on social media is until it isn't. And that's what you need to keep in mind. So, why does the public behave as they do? One, it's called sense making. So, in a crisis, people very organically. It's a psychosocial phenomenon. People very organically want to make sense of a situation. The mind hyper-organizes what they know, what they don't know. They hyper-analyze what they know, what they don't know. And in this case, we have fallout. It's to place blame. It's to have attribution. The next step is I want to make sense of it, then I want to blame someone. It's a very organic process. And it's not meant to be mean. It's just the way that we're wired. So when we talk about attribution, we think of this as either individual or collective cognition. People individually come to their own conclusions. They collectively come to a conclusion. And a lot of that is based on what they're seeing online. So this can influence, this can affect the behavior towards the organization. And again, it's going to impact the reputation at the end of the day. And if you try to silence these people, good luck. Because they are there, and they will not be ignored. They are Glenn Close with the bunny over the stove. They are. I had to do this, you know me, I gotta do the cultural references. But yes, they are there. People have a voice and they want to put it out there. So you have to deal with it. This makes proper response strategy all the more paramount. So improper result or improper response normally is going to result in a secondary disaster. I can't remember who it was, Jamie, maybe you can remind me, was the single worst thing that happened to Bounty was not just the sinking of the ship, but then occurred on the Facebook page. They were almost two unique, separate disasters in a weird way. How many people were on the page? How many people kind of went back and went, yeah. It was interesting, it was fascinating. I couldn't tear my eyes off it. I've never seen anything like it. So you have this external event, and now you have this online event, and it was overwhelming. All right, so in the old days, in the before time, the dream time, 10 years ago was a different story, was it not? Absolutely was. What you have is this. Crisis might happen, disaster occurs, someone gets out in front of the press, right? Think of the way that this is. I'm in a room similar to this, a little similar to this. We've got cameras, we've got people, someone's in front of a microphone, and they answer questions, right? The beauty of this is that it creates a certain lag time, because this is either going to news, radio, TV, or it's a press release. So, affords you time to craft a message, gives you time to think, gives you time to breathe. It was actually pretty luxurious. Gave you time to try to control a message too, because the timing in which you respond is also a lag time in people, the delivery of that message, and then the time of people absorbing that message, and then people communicating the message back, and then you responding again. So you might put something out there, it hits the evening news or the evening paper, and then the next day someone in public responds, and then maybe the next day after that, you respond back. There's a lot of time built into that back in the day. Typically, you have a specified or very public spokesperson, one person became the face of the event. What happens to them sometimes? But most of what we're talking about is static response. You can pick and choose who to respond to. In that room there, you're from the news, you're from the newspaper, someone over there is from a different newspaper. I may pick and choose who I might think is going to be more sympathetic to me. So I can choose not to answer a question. Public comments largely sequestered. Again, something is published in the newspaper. Back then, what did you do? Go to letter to the editor. And then it's up to the newspapers whether or not they actually put it in this edition. You don't get that anymore. The beauty of it is that it set you up this way. So, here's the organization. You individually deal with someone on the radio, someone on TV, someone in the newspaper, or at a press conference. You've got these nice little walls, these little barriers between all of them. And that's a little easier to control. But now we have new means, now we have new mediums. We have social media! And all its beautiful, messy, horrendous glory. We've got multiple platforms, and they're coming and going all the time. If you look at the social media landscape, I think there's probably about 100 different platforms out there that you can choose from. So, aside from multiple platforms, we now have the relentless global news cycle. Something happens now, I comment a couple seconds later, and someone in China can pick that up, not 2 seconds after that. And it's constant, and it's unrelentless. It's relentless. It's relentless. And it's overwhelming. Everyone has a voice, and boy, do they like to use it. We also now have the disembodied spokesperson. How many of you have a Facebook page for your organization, and the posting of the page is just the organization name? Yeah, how many? Right, so when someone posts, they're not saying, hey, Kevin here, da 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 da. No, it's saying Small Shirts America. Well, except for you. You do go to Zimmer Short. We'll talk about that. Yeah, so you're. So you talk to yourself?
She's going on like this is a great post, and someone's comment on it, might as well be me.
That'd be a really interesting strategy. But yes, what it results is you become disembodied. People know that an organization is more than just one person most of the time. So it's that disembodied. There's no face to really to attribute to it. It's just a name. It's just a block of letters that they see. A disembodied voice can have an interesting impact on the situation. We now have dynamic text. Remember, so 70% of how you communicate is how you look and the tone of your voice. And very little is really about the words you actually speak. How does that change in the text? What's one of the social norms on social media when it comes to text? Capitalize. Yeah, I can't get my dad away from that. My dad likes to type in all caps, and he gave up on Facebook for like 2 or 3 years. Because you're yelling at them. I'm saying it for emphasis. No, you're yelling. I couldn't get him to understand that for the longest time. But yeah, we have the text becomes dynamic. Think about how people use punctuation in an interesting way. Think about how people say certain words. You know, we get these little buzzwords that mean a certain way. You look at the text, and you have to consider the text visually. So it's not just what the person is saying, because once it's all in caps, now you're yelling, you're doing the big arm thing on social media. That's the big arm thing. That's the equivalent. That's how you have to think about it. But then you have text, quote, usually coupled with a picture. So how does the picture impact the text? And now you have people engaging with you, liking, sharing, or commenting. So how does the quality and the combination of all of that appear as someone reads the text? It all has an impact. Text is really dynamic. So it's another thing you have to consider. So, because we have these new means, we have new mediums, this lovely model where you are safely in the center, keeping all of these at bay, has changed. This doesn't exist anymore. This has gone away. This is a fond memory from another time. What we have now is this. Because every news organization has a website and Twitter feed and a Facebook account. Yeah, we have this incredible overlap. And your organizations have Facebook feed and Twitter feed, and you have a website. And everything is piggybacking, and you can tag, and you can hashtag, and everything is overlapped. So those walls, those little barriers that you had that gave you a little bit of cushion, a little bit of protection, gone. No more. So, at the end of the day, what makes social media so scary in crisis? Does anybody just sit there and think, oh man? Did anybody here actively worry about it? Does anyone? You do? That's good to know. I can turn my ringer on. As my husband likes to say, my phone is a transmit-only device sometimes. So knowing that, I might have to actually turn that ringer on. But it kills my battery. Man, okay. But how many people fear it? Does anybody actively fear it? No one here is actually, we just don't want to admit it. You actually fear it? What do you fear?
Just something, without something that could be seem very harmless, and then something makes it very changes the conversation,
So easily done. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, every time you post, it's something like that. Everything, I reread everything like 1,000 times just to make sure, like, okay, how can this be misinterpreted, or, it's as innocuous as something we see. I get really paranoid about it, constantly on checking it to make sure someone didn't misinterpret it. I'm always doing that. It's very stressful.
So this is an active concern in the back of your mind. Anyone else?
But you say it's one little thing to read in the prayer.
But in your
One little drunk post can read in the prayer.
Oh yeah. Drunken Facebooking is the best. I live for that. I I would love to see a good drunk Facebook post. I'm so happy these days. But when it's camera, it's like usually really good. Love it. Love it. But yeah, you should be concerned. You should absolutely be concerned. It's interesting how these things can spin out of control very quickly. But what scares us? One, that feeling of loss of control. Yeah? Big scary internet out there. What was it you, how did you refer to it here? The dirty internet?
Dirty.
The dirty internet. Different from the dark web. The dirty internet. Love that. We'll use it from now on. Explicit public criticism. Happened before. 10 years ago it happened, but it was around a water cooler. It was in a room that you couldn't consider. People you couldn't see, people you didn't know. Now it's in text, on your page, right in front of you, and for everybody to see. Explicit public criticism. Temporal spacing, man, that speed. You barely blink when there's a new post, a new post, a new post. The transmutation of the message. That's really scary because lack of context. You said something, someone didn't understand the context, it got misinterpreted. Or you say something, here's the truth of the situation, someone reinterprets it, and it becomes a game of operator. You see that quite a bit too. And perception versus truth. One thing you have to realize about social media, perception is everything. I like to make a joke, you know, we're sailors, we don't care about the truth, as long as the story's good. Yeah? Yeah, we don't care about the truth. We just like the story. Perception, right here. The truth of the matter really hardly matters to anybody. It's the perception of it. And that's what you have to consider. So, communication crises. The usual suspects. How do these kind of things happen? Let me tell you. One, employee, of course. Two, executives, someone up top, someone on Facebook for the first time. I can spot that one a mile away. I love those guys. They're great. A spokesperson accidentally saying something, or some authorized entity, sometimes a former employee. You see that, someone who used to be associated with you, people would remember them being associated with you, and then all of a sudden they're speaking on your behalf. Begins with offhand comment or a joke. Speaking before thinking, or really writing, posting before thinking, or drinking and posting. Commenting on a situation before knowing reality. These are kind of the more basic things that you'll run into all the time. Let me see these come and go. It's amazing how I get emails or phone calls about votes. This one thing happened. How can we proceed? What do we do about this? And usually, there's a lot of this, 9 times out of 10. Someone said something and then you could potentially insult a sponsor. Yeah, you gotta deal with that. Small things. And the most damaging, false information. False information, once it's out there, it's so hard to make it go away. It's so hard to correct people. But this is another big one. So, something's happened. Things are blowing up. You're crazy. What do you gotta do? Yes, take that deep breath. So, embrace the chaos. It's going to happen, you're in the maelstrom, just accept it. Accept it and just go along for the ride. Because it's not going to stop anytime soon. You got like 48 hours, you're going to have to deal with this. Realize you have no control. Control in social media is a myth. I love people who think that they're going to go in and take control of this situation. Because those people, 9 times out of 10, make the situation worse. You have no control. No one has the resources to control the internet, so stop trying. We'll get into some examples of that, some of the bigger ones. Fairness doesn't apply. That's kind of sad. It's not a human condition. But fairness doesn't apply here. It doesn't. Yeah, because perception is king. Try to keep all your stakeholders in mind. And on that note, one thing I often hear, criticism. Someone criticizes you and all of a sudden you're a troll. No, not necessarily. Just because someone criticizes you, maybe you're not being fair or just or even polite, doesn't necessarily make them a troll. Troll is a very specific definition. And if you're going to get your hackles up over someone criticizing you, you better back out of the game and put someone else in your place. Even though this person, again, may be unreasonable, may be loud, may be prolific, may even be wrong, they're still a stakeholder too. You have to try to address it. Identify your digital fans, who are the people that are really on your side. That can be key. That can be enormously useful to tap into them. These are the people that you want to speak to. You have to speak to everybody. You're effectively speaking to everybody. But again, those digital fans, keep them in mind. We'll talk about that why in a little bit. But at the end of the day, if you can really identify them and reach them, you can galvanize them. They are a powerful tool. So, basic music. What's the first thing you do? Under no circumstances do you provide false information or less than accurate information. If you don't know something, you don't know it. Be honest about don't knowing. Please. Someone's posting it, it's like, this is the truth. This is the truth of the matter as I understand it. This is the information that we have. This is the information we currently have. We're waiting for more facts to come in. But don't provide less than accurate information. It's too easy to get tripped up down the road. Become Switzerland. Stay neutral on a variety of fronts. First, emotionally. This is because when you have strong emotions and you put it out there on your Twitter feed or on your Facebook, people perceive it as a lack of control. And what they want from you right now is a sense of control, that you're keeping it together. Nobody wants to see you go spastic online. If you're representing your organization, you got to keep it together. So try to remain emotionally neutral. Politically, so Twitter, Facebook, people fight. Yes, we've all seen it. I love the Facebook fight, by the way. That's, oh, yes. Talk about a good time, man. I love a good Facebook fight. You need to stay out of it. You need to stay out of it. Don't take sides. Do not take sides. Once you've done that, you've limited yourself. You've cut yourself off from a certain contingent that you might be able to reach. So do not take sides. Why? Because again, you are this faceless creature out there posting on behalf of this organization. So you already have a little bit less credibility in the situation. So the more that you don't pin yourself to a certain side, someone is not going to develop some opinion about you. So staying neutral is key. Disembodied voices perceived as less trustworthy. So again, try to remain open to everyone, as difficult as that can seem. Also remaining secular. Just as people do not want to see you spazzing out, having big emotions, people don't want to see you getting political. People also, when we talk about getting religious, that means that you're giving up control to someone else. And that, even from the most religious person, there have been really interesting studies where they've gone online and you have like very religious persons viewing various crisis comm, and spokespersons who get uber religious are perceived as having a lack of control. You've given it out to a higher power, which means nobody's dealing with it on the ground, and you still have to deal with it on the ground. So be careful of that. These are small things that you can do. And lastly, what you want to do is engage. A lot of people, oh, I can see it. I can see a big mess where, like, I'll be looking at a Facebook page or I look at some Twitter feed and something happens, like, oh, wow, I'm glad I'm not that person who has to deal with this mess. And then that feeling of, like, I can't deal with it. I want to shut down. I just want to turn off the computer. But you can't. That's the time where you got to roll up your sleeves and jump in the mud, and you gotta mix it up sometimes. So, how many people are in control of their organization's Facebook page or have some kind of administrative status? How many people in a situation delete? You've deleted? What have you deleted? Okay. How was it inappropriate? Okay. Anyone else? Jamie?
I don't want to get into this right now. I do have
You want to save it for later?
whatever fits in the presentation, but there was a situation where we could talk about
An exception to prove the rule. We'll talk about that. Oh well. Yes, sir.
Again, it was inappropriate with people.
Okay. Anyone else? Something different. We'll talk about that. That's actually a good point. We'll talk about that. Was there someone in the back over there? I'm behind the post.
We deleted sort of. I mean, we usually before we do it, we get the person to say why we.
Okay. Good point. Okay, we'll talk about that. So, to delete or not to delete? That is the question. Facebook is usually, when you have no control over Twitter, Facebook is the one that we're dealing with here, yes. Something happens on the page, it's front and center. A lot of people are noticing it, so it keeps getting shifted up to the top because of their algorithm, and it's just there, like a big gaping wound. Social media has various social norms, but transparency of information, egalitarianism, that fact that everybody has a voice is one of the, these are the most sacred. These are the most sacred, protected social norms that we have on social media. So, my advice to you, do not delete. Do not delete. Why? You're violating the social order. The perception, you're hiding something, you're reinforcing an opinion of wrongdoing, correctly, incorrectly, whatever the case may be, someone's going to feel that way. A lot of times we see what's called scorn ball, so all of a sudden people who may have been on your side, if you're being attacked because you deleted, and people will attack you for deleting, all of a sudden these other people who may have been on your side start gloming onto it. Also, when you delete, you're driving the conversation away from where you can monitor it. Because if people don't feel comfortable talking on their page and feel like there can no longer be discourse, they'll go somewhere else to have that conversation online, and now you're cut off from it. Believe me, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. Now, there are a few exceptions. Someone swearing. That's always the big one. Someone swearing. Asking them for some civility, asking them to dial it back, and if they agree, I'm going to let it stand because it serves as a warning to someone else. We're going to try to be polite here. So let them see that someone swore and you engaged them and that maybe they conceded. In the case that my husband brought up in the back, an exception was on a Facebook page, people were having a fight about something completely different than what that post was about, not even about your organization. And that became a problem. We tried to engage them. Actually, I was involved in that. We tried to engage them. Neither would cease or desist. So yes, deleted. But told them why. And then you gave out your phone number and said, I'm happy to talk about this further. I hope we can carry on this conversation, but I'm taking it down and this is why. Self-deleting. If you don't delete and you leave it up, and normal flow of discourse occurs, one of the most powerful things I saw in the whole bounty situation was people actually self-deleting. The problem with that was that Bounty got blamed for it. People said, oh, the administrator's deleting. He did in some cases. In other cases, it was people who took a deep breath, thought the better of it, and said, yeah, you know what, I'm probably speaking out of turn here. I don't know all the facts. And they went back and self-deleted. That's good. And you want that. You want to encourage that. But when you're trying to engage someone in misperceptions, incivility, what have you, that's going on your page, when you do that, it's not that you're just trying to change that person's mind or change their behavior. You might be speaking to them, but you're sending a broader message to everybody who views that engagement. So you may not be able to change their mind. They may continue being a jerk. They may continue being really impolite. But you're sending a very powerful message to the people who view that. And that's when we talk about your digital fans. That's when we talk about the people who will come to your side because they see that you're being honest, that you're being forthright, that you're trying to keep the peace, that you're trying to engage them in a civil manner. They don't. So what happens? They start disregarding this person. Or even better, they start to attack them. And they attack them on your behalf, and you have a nice buffer there. And then you can just step in and say, please. Be nice to him. Let's encourage him to say, you come off as a good person. And that's good, that's powerful. But a lot of times, if you can get people to engage with them, people will actually correct themselves online. They won't say the thing. Seen a lot of apologies online. You're right. Spoke out of turn, didn't mean that, sorry, move on. And I say leave it up. It's the good, it's the bad, the ugly. We all know it exists anyway, but let's see how it flows. Let people see how you handled it. Because what does that do? Reputation goes up. Trustworthiness goes up. You deal with people in a calm, fair, civil manner. Those people around you, trust capital goes up. That's a good thing. So, what to do instead? Do not attack. Do not insult. Respond in a neutral fashion, but respond as much as you can, as much as you're able to. Please respond. Ask for civility, ask for patience. So few of us ever ask. It's incredible. People complain that they can't get people to engage on their Facebook page. You know, from a marketing perspective, I ask them, like, well, have you asked them to engage times out of 10, no, you haven't asked people to engage with you. Same thing in a crisis. Ask for people to be patient. Ask for people to be civil. Ask for time. If you ask, people will give it to you. They will. But you have to actually ask for it. Also, those digital fans, those people that you're building the trust, the trust capital with, let them respond for you as well. Keep them in mind if you can. Please be civil to people on page. We're trying to have civil discourse here, gentle reminders. But letting your community respond for you is also, again, a really powerful tool. We talk about keyboard warriors. We usually talk about it in the pejorative. People who take up some social justice cause, and usually a bunch of blowhards and they're obnoxious, and online for the most part we don't like them. But I think there's a way of actually turning people into useful, keyboard warriors under situations like this. Because again, everybody wants to have a voice. It's like, hey, I know this organization, they've dealt with me fairly, they've run a good clean ship, they've got good rules, they've got good record of safety. Let's all chill out and make the facts come in. Or I know this person, this isn't what they meant, this isn't what happened over here. Let these people speak for you. Let them do that on Twitter. Let them do that on Facebook. You can't control it anyway, so you might as well encourage it. And you'll find that what this does is it galvanizes, again, those social norms. You find that you can bring people back to center. It does work. I've seen thousands of cases where it has. So, the other thing you need to do is you have to be careful of timing. Resist the urge to immediately post. I wouldn't put that level of concern on everything you post, but I like your thinking. Resist the urge to post. Take a beat, think about it, breathe, think about the response. Sometimes I tell people, write it out on paper first and look at it. Don't feel like you have to respond right away. Because if you're shooting off the cuff, sometimes you might make the matter worse by how you respond. When in doubt, pass it by another. Copy edit, simple enough. You've got someone else in office, or text it to someone. Get someone else's opinion. Are you following this? Yeah, I'm thinking of posting this. Is this okay? Yeah, this is okay. Okay, I'm going to post it. Another set of eyes never hurts. But that timing, because we have that relentless posting, and comments are building up, or the tweets are flooding in, and you feel like you have to all of a sudden react. You do, but it doesn't mean that you can't take a breath, think about it, consider it, and then post. I would love this in all crises, have my own command and control center. Wouldn't that be a beautiful thing? Yeah, normally it's like two people over a 10-year-old computer that should have a crank. No one with a lot of experience dealing with the crises. That's a luxury. But for the most part, what everybody else in this room is dealing with is not that. This is when you can call in the volunteers. You have people who volunteer for you. They volunteer on your boat, they might volunteer in your office. If you've got people who are really engaged with you online, call them as a volunteer. Hey, this is happening. Are you following this? Can you help us out? Can you go on the web, run some key searches, see what's popping up on the web? Someone engages with you on Twitter. Hey, can you do me a favor? Can you kind of watch Twitter and text me if you see something that we should know? Someone else on Facebook. Hey, can you look at various pages? Can you, scan the environment for us? Call in the volunteers who will do it. You can direct the response. You have volunteers. Respond this way. Give them a script. This is what we're saying. This is what I'm saying. Can you do this? Can you do this? Exactly like that? Cool. Some loose. Make sure it's people you can trust. These are people who can look for engagement. These are people who can engage with this multitude of responses. No, that is not the correct information. This is the correct information. They can help you. They're enormously useful. But mostly monitoring, being that other set of eyes. Looking at the environment and seeing what else is going on. Because a lot of times we're so hyper-focused on one or two mediums, we don't see everything else that's going on. Particularly if you're on Facebook, you're looking at your page, but you're not looking at all these other pages where all this other stuff could be going on. Sailing, we have a lot of forums, getting people out on the web and looking at various sailing forums. Really useful. A lot going on in G-Captain. Not always for the good, but you should know what's out there. Wooden boats, a little more civil. Sailing anarchy, mixed bag, but a lot of conversations out there. You need to know what people are saying. So call in those volunteers and ask them to go here, you go there, you do this. And they can be an incredible tool for you. conversations being had everywhere. So as many as you can get a volunteer dedicated to one platform is going to help. But if you don't have volunteers, there's a lot of third-party social media management platforms that are easy to set up. They're so easy, Hootsuite. It's free. It takes about 5 minutes to learn. Load up the Twitter feed, give it some search terms. Hook up your Facebook page with some search terms. You can get some interest, it'll monitor your feedback. You can start seeing the scroll. Very simple tools, take 5-10 minutes to learn. So if you don't have volunteers, you have to do it yourself. That's another way of doing it. There's a lot of tools out there available to you. You might also consider calling the response medium. You got Facebook page, you got Twitter, you got Instagram, you got Facebook. You might consider just going down to one focal point of your communication. So how you do that is really dependent. Usually I say just a website or Facebook. So static response, that's going to be your website. It's a flat page, you can post a message, you can update it as you need to, it's flat, there's no interaction, gives you a little bit of time. This is good when you have limited resources. And again, because it gives you a little bit of that breathing space, but also inhibits response. Because if you're paying attention to a website and fooling around with that, it means you're not listening to all of this other conversation that's over here. The dynamic response, of course, is going to be Facebook. This is best for the team approach. You know, Facebook, there's a lot that goes on there. You want multiple eyes on it, you really do. So if you've got another person or 2 other people at least, then yeah, Facebook is the place to be. And tell people constantly, we're going to limit all of our responses to Facebook. Please do not call the office, don't check the website, we stop our Twitter feed, we're going to put all our information here. So, real-time monitoring, that's a bonus, that's a plus. But the con, that tendency to overwhelm. Because once all those comments start flowing in, it's like, it feels horrible. It's like, I can't possibly respond to all of this. Even with the people here, you can possibly respond to all of this. You really don't have to, because most of the time people are asking the same questions, making the same comments. So you know, if someone's making a comment you really feel it needs to be dealt with, now you can reply to them directly. So find the one with the most likes. Someone makes this comment, 15 people like it, respond to that comment, because not all the people who like it are going to get that update. If someone's asked a question, and a lot of people have liked it, or if you see that the same question is being asked, reply to at least one of them. You don't have to reply to all, reply to one. Trust me, people are going to get that updated information. That's what you want to do. But don't forget about your website. So the biggest thing we all still have it. The danger here is that Facebook is really taking over websites for a lot of people, because websites really were just a communication tool. Not a lot of people are doing any type of commerce on their websites. So when Facebook takes that over, and then people are like, well, this thing on Facebook is just too messy, I just want some information. You go to your website, what happens? One, people always forget their password in the time of crisis, now they don't have access to it. Or they leave it to a dedicated IT person who's asleep and you can't wake them up and you can't locate them to get it changed. Or maybe you let your IT contract drop and now you have 0 access to your own website. Or for whatever reason, the person is just not available to you and you need to update it and you can't. Also, if you can do that, have that crafted message. All our responses will be on Facebook. All our updates will be here. We'll try to update as much as possible. This is what we know, blah, blah, blah. If you're going to have a static response, have that access. Make sure you have the password or the person available to you. But pay attention to that website, because when people don't want to hang out on Facebook, they'll go to your website, and the other thing is increase your bandwidth. Because if you have increased your bandwidth, you're going to get this. And it's a good way to frustrate people who feel cut off from information, because we're all information junkies now. We need our fix. And what they'll do is go back to the Facebook page and they'll complain about it there. It happens. We've seen it happen time and time again. So if you're not going to use it as a response, post a message, tell people to go to Facebook, but always increase your bandwidth, always, no matter what. Or if you're going to have it as a response, again, make sure you always have access to it. What's our current password? When's the last time we updated our website? Who's in charge of this thing? How do we get hold of the directors? So if you're going to use it or not use it, you still have to deal with it in some way. But first and foremost, always make sure you call your internet service provider and say, we're having a thing, increase your bandwidth. You can always dial it back down afterwards. 5 minutes? Okay, so that gives us enough time to deal with maybe an example or two. Now, we have to make this pretty generalized because, again, remember we're talking about the complexity of all these different types of crises that can occur her, so we're giving her general advice. Well, let's talk about a few online examples. These were basically communication profiles. So the example, an intern, actually no, this intern. An intern posted this on behalf of the Red Cross during an event. Ryan found 2 more 4-bottle packs of dogfish heads and Midas Touch beer. When we drink, we do it right. You really don't want the Red Cross or disaster responders posting something like this. Now, this actually happened quite late, and it was really more of a slap-happy event. They weren't drunk, but they were just, late, they were dealing with stuff, and they were just kind of feeling silly and posted this. So we see that it's 1 day later, but really it was only like 45 minutes later. We deleted the rogue tweet, but rest assured the Red Cross is sober and we've confiscated the keys. This is a beautiful and perfect response, because really they responded quickly. We've deleted the rogue tweet. They've acknowledged that this wasn't something that should be there, without making a bigger thing of it. Oh, we deleted it, we fired this kid, No, it was a rogue tweet, we deleted it. They're reassuring you that we are professionals, we're behaving in a professional manner, but then they kept it off with a funny little joke. Beautiful, perfect, the perfect response. They took what could have been a thing and they made it nothing very quickly. Not to see here, people, move on. Kenneth Cole, fashion designer. Millions are in an uproar in hashtag Cairo. Rumor is they heard our new spring collection is now available online at blah, 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 blah. This is very obviously Arab Spring, the uprising in Egypt. Regarding the Egypt tweet, we weren't intending to make light of a serious situation. We understand the sensitivity of this historic moment. Really good response. I might have thrown an apology in on this one, but they use the appropriate wording. They're not taking a side. We understand the sensitivity to all involved. We understand the historicness of this to all involved. They're remaining neutral. It's emotional, not political. Simple comment, still might have thrown an apology, but a very good response. Took something, made it nothing, really quick, very little follow-up. But these are just kind of these examples. Someone puts up a joke, it's misinterpreted, and in this case it's hard to not interpret that incorrect, or not interpret the way that it was meant to be. And it becomes a thing. We've seen it time and time again. Someone puts their foot in their mouth on social media, and then everybody latches onto it and it blows up. Offline examples. Something happens in the offline world, and then comes onto social media. How many people have seen one of those stories in the newspaper? A waitress doesn't get a tip, but instead gets a nasty note from someone, and then all of a sudden ends up online. Yeah, we've all heard of these things. Applebee's was probably the biggest one that we've seen of this. So, a waitress didn't receive a tip, got a religious sermon, showed it to a friend. The friend, who didn't work for Applebee's, took a picture, posted it online. Applebee's said that this waitress violated their company policy by embarrassing and exposing a customer, and they fired her. Said same friend then went on Facebook and made a thing of it. So it became a big uproar. So Applebee's response was largely inappropriate in that, one, they didn't see why people were getting upset. They said, hey, we followed company policy, we fired this waitress. But people were saying, yes, but she didn't do it, it was a friend. So their perception of it was, I seem to be doing the right thing. But when everybody was screaming under that they were wrong, they refused to acknowledge that people were upset with them because of the actions they felt they were unjust taken towards this waitress. So they misread the public perception, and they had this double down strategy. They kept going on saying, but this, but this, but this, and they kept telling the public, you're wrong, you're wrong. Well, 1 billion people in China are not wrong about rice, are they? No, I should think not. Same thing applies in social media. When people are telling you you're doing something wrong, whether you believe it or not, you get that many people yelling at you, you're doing something wrong. Because it's the perception, not the truth of the matter, it's the perception of it. How they're handling this in social media is wrong. You have to listen to that, you have to respond to it. This person was removed. Eventually, you could see this. They went on Facebook and were deleting posts like crazy. People were setting up Applebee Facebook pages. So people think they're going to the Applebee Facebook page, but they're going to a fake Applebee Facebook page, and it's all devoted to this waitress's story. So, the guy deleted it off their page. This person started a new Applebee page, threw it up there, and then it grew and grew and grew. What was interesting is that Applebee had been experiencing all of this profit and growth for a number of years, something like, I think 4 years straight. Immediately the next financial reporting era, they actually dropped almost 15%. That's huge for a company that big. Direct impact, you can measure it. Domino's in 2009. How many people know this one? You know this one? You know the story? So some Domino's employees, teenagers, I think molested might be the word to use. They abused the food. And they did it on video. And then they loaded it to YouTube. Let's talk about viral, shall we? 83 million hits. I think 2.3 in the first 12 hours. 2.3 million hits in the first 12 hours. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. So, what does Domino's do? Immediate apology. Plus, yeah, we fired them. Because in that case we do. Because not only have they abused the food, they actually did send that food out to a customer. Yeah, I think fire is warranted. But here was the brilliant part of this. They acknowledged this, it was inappropriate, it was poor management oversight, this is not what we want from our employees, and they actually used it as a tool for public input. Domino's wants to hear from you. How can we improve our pizza? If you remember that campaign, it's because of this incident. Because Domino's had been actually losing the pizza battle for many, many years. They used to be number 1 in the 80s, they dropped a bit in the 90s, and by 2009, I think they were like number 10 in the nation. They were getting beat by everybody. But they used this tool in a really brilliant marketing campaign on social media. Tell us what we can do to improve our pizza. People did, and they were actually largely positive. So in doing this and then creating a media campaign around it, they actually regained the number 1 spot in pizza delivery. Brilliant, brilliant. After that, because again, they were damaging the nets and gross teenager molesting the food and sending it to a customer. It's like, but they recovered it beautifully. This happened, yes, this is why it happened, we apologize, this is how we're going to fix it, and oh, by the way, what else can we do for you? Beautiful response. Talk about building that capital. Toyota did the same thing as well. During the brake crisis in 2009, another good example. Inviting people in, tell us your Toyota story. So it wasn't that they also, had a dedicated team of everybody dealing with every single comment that came in on the Facebook page, but it was also, hey, we'll deal with these comments, but tell us your story. So there's a lot of ways that you can recover from these things. There's a million examples, and I'm happy to share any case studies with you. But I think we're at the end.